and welcome to SDU RIO Makerspace's tutorials. So today we'll cover how to use the vinyl cutter printer or the BN2. So first off, when you've logged into the computer in the graphical room, if this is the first time you're logging in, you need to go through the auto login shortcut right here. After you've double-clicked it, just leave the mouse be. It will log in for you, and then you'll have the software open that you need to use. If this is not your first time and you've logged in before using the auto login, you can just double-click Offline Utility and then just press Connection Check. It should tell you BN2-20 here, and you should say OK. And then you need to wait. You'll have to wait until this button here is blue and says Open. Now that it's blue, I can press Open. It's going to tell me the machine is in sleep mode. If I press Recover, it'll come back. It takes a little bit for the startup process, so just wait until that's done. It says output possible, meaning that it's actually ready to print now. If you had changed the role, or if somebody else had, it might say that you need to load a role on. If that happens, let's just simulate that here. So it would say load media. You would have to apply the role and then press setup and then choose the role that is on the machine. So I know that this is the role, so I press OK, and then I press OK. Now the setup is finished. You are technically ready to print now. If you had opened this with the auto login, it would show you all the software here on the side, but if you use the offline utility, it will only show you this. Now the next thing we need to have open is the VersaWorks program. So let's open that up. Now in here we have a few different things. One, you can see that the printer is ready to print. It's a little low on white ink, but that's okay for now. Up here you can see the current print status. Down here is not really that important. Then in here we have our job list. Depending on what vinyl you have put on the machine, you need to choose a correct queue for your job. Now if you have textile on, which is the one we currently have loaded on, you'll have to put in your jobs here. You just drag them in to apply them to the queue. There's a little template file that you can either download prior to the course and open up and look into, or open it up in the course. We'll have it on the computer. Here you'll be shown what the different things you need to be aware of when using the vinyl cutter here. So there's a few things we need to keep in mind. If we need to cut something, it needs to have an outline that is 0.01 millimeter thick. Also, the color needs to be a specific color, and we'll look at that in a second. Another thing is try to keep it as the top layer. So over on the side here, you can go into layers, and then if you are having some issues with it both printing and cutting this line, it's only supposed to cut this line, not print it. If you do have those issues, try to move it to the top of the layer here. Any color you put in, it will print that color. The only color that it won't print in here is white. If you actually want to print white, you would have to use the color RDG_white. It doesn't matter what layer it's placed at, it will be the first thing that prints. So if it's the top layer, it will still print the white first, and then all the other layers above it. The reason for this is that the white you're printing isn't actually used for solid block color, but is used in, if you want transparent, to use the transparent film, then you need to print white underneath all the other colors that you apply on the print, because otherwise it'll be too see-through. If you want these colors to stick and be more solid, then you need to apply the white underneath first. Now that also means that in a case like this, where I have a cloud above this behind it, that if I were to print this, I would have this bottom part actually printed here, and you'll be able to see it, because the printer will just recognize everything with the color white as transparent. So if you would want to do a feature like this, what you can do is you could select both of these, and then using Illustrator and the tool here called Shape Builder, press that. Then you can do by clicking this and this. Now I've added the back part to the cloud. So if I move the cloud now, you can see that there's nothing underneath. So that's one way if you want to put stuff on top and not have it print behind and the stuff on top is white, for example, then use this tool to remove those parts behind it. Great. So now I'll just set up this little ghost here to print. So what I need to do is I press the outline here. I go over to the stroke. Now I need to make sure it's the right thickness, so I'll make this 0.01 millimeters. If it says points here, just delete that and say millimeters, and it will automatically change it to the correct value. Now go into the stroke color here, and then you need to find the correct colors. Now the way we do that is by opening the library here, and then go to Other Library, and then you need to find the swatch file. During the course, you will have it on your desktop. If it's not on the desktop, there is a downloadable swatch file from the signup site. This is what the swatch file is supposed to be called, Roland VersaWorks.ai. Open that, and now you'll have the colors down here. Now, to change the color of this circle, go over here and change it from the fill to the stroke by just clicking the stroke. Now, if I press here, it will change the stroke color. This means that this will now be recognized as a cutting line. And just to show it off as well, I will change the white here by pressing the fill to the white called RDG_white. Now it will appear gray here, but it will print as white. Now that this is ready, we go up to File, Save As, Save on Computer, just somewhere you can find it, and save it as an EPS. It's important that you save it as an EPS because that's the only file format that the VersaWorks software understands. Now, another thing is that we are, in this case, because I have different outboards, you only need to do this if you're working with different outboards. But if you only have one, it doesn't matter, then you just save this. But I only need one of these outboards, and by going down to range, I can select the one I want, and I'm pretty sure this was 2. So we'll save that. Everything here is as it should be, just press OK. And now you should be able to find your EPS file. Open up VersaWorks again. Now drag the file in, and it should be here in your job queue. Now it's important to note here that we have these red stripes. This means that this is recognized as it should be printed white. That's good, we want that. Another thing is we need to double click in here. The settings should have been set by the fact that we put it in the right queue, the textile queue. But we need to go through these anyway, just to make sure. We also just zoom in, make sure everything looks as it should. Now the resolution here isn't correctly shown, but this is just preview. But it looks fine. We have the red cutting line around it. If it's animated like this in red, you know that it's recognized it as a cutting line. The first thing you need to do in here as well is get the media width. This is set to 450 millimeters, so if you do forget to click here, it probably will still work, but it's a good idea to make sure that you click here, get media width. If you need additional copies, press here to increase the amounts you want. You can also change the spacing in between each of these, but I wouldn't decrease it under 2 millimeters. Leave yourself some space in between, and also for the printer to be able to cut and color in the places it needs to. Under quality, make sure it's the correct material selected. It should be if you use the correct cues, but just make sure, go in and check. Standard print quality is more than fine. And just make sure that the colors presets are set to Prepress Europe. That will give you correct colors. Under print control, as a default, cut sheet after output is on. If it's on, it means that when the job is done, it will cut the sheet free. If you know you're leaving the printer for a little bit and coming back, and you don't want the print to drop on the floor and get dirty or whatever, tick this off, and then when the print is done, open the BN2 Utility here and press Sheet Cutting, and it will cut the sheet off. But as a default, it will just cut the sheet off for you. Make sure that all of these are set to Use Default Media Settings. This means that it will use the settings that are meant for that media type that is loaded on the machine currently. Cut control, you can change what order it's printing and cutting. I would leave this as print and cut, so print first then cut. In cases where you do this, it's also advisable to add a bleed to whatever you're designing. This means that if we go back to Illustrator for a second, let's say this circle had a color, then instead of just having it be blue here, I would add more blue on the outside here, so that the cutting line is cutting in the color instead of outside the color. So if the cutting knife is a little misaligned compared to the print, you won't get white lines inside of your colored print. Then in here again, if you do need to reduce the size of your print, so in this case, because the artboard was this size, it added a lot of like empty space we don't need. So I could go in here, and I need to make sure I've selected the right tool, and make sure that that little dot appears. Then you can move it down and up and to the sides and to the sides. Now, it might not be necessary in every case, but in this case, I could save some material if I went in and did this and press OK. And now you can see they're closer together, and I might be able to fit another ghost here. That was basically it. Now, if you press OK, you are ready to print, and you could press print here. Now, let's say I had another print I wanted to do as well. All right, I've changed the settings for the orange. Now I've saved it. And notice what happens now. So instead of this orange being placed next to all of these ghosts, it's being placed underneath. This is because it's considered as a separate print job. If I wanted these to be considered as the same print job, I could hold down Shift, press, and then I could nest them. And now we have the orange next to all the ghosts, because it understands that this orange is part of this print job. If you want to unnest again, just press the button down here again, and it will unnest the jobs. So make sure, if you are printing more than one thing, to nest them so that you're saving on print paper. The last thing to do is to just press on the print, and it will send the job to the queue and start printing. You should now be able to use the BN2-20 vinyl cutter printer in our Makerspace. Happy making!